So this is going to be a video that isn't really edited, and that's because I'm lazy. But it's something that's been bugging me for a couple of days now because I recently got into an argument. Well, I got into an argument a very long time ago on a YouTube comment thread. And I think it was like even like a Super Geek Mike video that was totally unrelated. But somehow someone said something along the lines of intelligence is knowing that Frankenstein was a scientist, wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein was the monster. And it's that classic thing of like, well, the monster isn't called Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein's monster. But everyone says, oh, well, actually, Frankenstein was the monster because, he was an evil scientist or whatever. And I don't believe that. Like, not a little bit. You could argue that he's a monster and that he's like horribly, horribly irresponsible. And he's obviously like a terrible coward. Victor Frankenstein in the book is just awful. But he's not awful in a way that is like inhuman. Like he makes this monster and like when you think about it, it's not as bad as they make it out to be because like modern day we have like corpse farms where CSI guys just watch bodies rot and mess around with them trying to do forensic stuff. I remember reading about how some old lady donated her body to science and the US military strapped her dead body with explosives and blew it up to see what shrapnel would do or something like that. So people are doing terrible things to dead bodies, and people are just kind of okay with it. I mean, there's an unwilling aspect of it, but as Diogenes, who I don't think Diogenes was a real person. That's the point. But Diogenes allegedly said, "When I'm dead, throw me over the city walls." And when his like students said, "Well, what about being torn apart by animals?" And he's like, "Well, and that the case, if that's the case, then give me a stick to fight them off with." And they'll say, "Oh, well, how are you supposed to fight them off if you're dead?" He's like, "Exactly, that's the point," and that's funny. But yeah, so he's not like he's a kind of a bad scientist because he doesn't use good ethics. But he makes his monster, and what does he do upon seeing it come to life? He passes out because he's so scared. Because he's a massive coward. So he falls asleep and passes out. The monster runs off, and then the monster's basically gone. And then some time goes by, and then uh his brother gets killed by the monster. The monster comes back and kills his brother. And then Frankenstein finds out about it somehow. And then the monster frames his like maid or whoever it is, like his like nanny or whoever, the girl who's supposed to be looking after the kid for the murder, and so she gets hanged because, again, Frankenstein's a coward. He could have come forward and said, actually, the monster was responsible. First of all, no one's gonna take him seriously. Oh yeah, the monster that I created did it. Even think that in the book he did some time in like an asylum, or he was like away for a while, or maybe that's later. Anyway, the point is that he could have helped save her life, but he didn't because he was a coward. But also maybe whether or not that would have worked anyway. and more of his friends and family gets killed because he's incompetent. He's a coward who doesn't know how to fight the monster. But it was like, okay, yes, he's so maybe he's a monster because he's cowardice, gross negligence, and how irresponsible he is. Okay, maybe. I really, really, really do not like when people say that the creature is not a monster. Like, even in like the broadest, like most basic terms of what a monster is, a giant reanimated corpse is, you know, a monster. Monster literally means just like a thing that isn't a human, but not really an animal that is adversarial towards humanity. And that's exactly what it is. Uh, and you could say, well, yeah, he didn't really choose that though because he was, he got shot at, he got burned, he got yelled at and scared away because he was abandoned. And yeah, there's something there, but later on in the story, like he willingly chooses to kill people, like maliciously kill people. Like when he killed Victor Frankenstein's little brother, it wasn't like an accident. He ran into the kid, and the kid was like, "Hey, my brother's Victor Frankenstein," and then the monster killed him out of anger. And you could say, "Oh, well, maybe it's a crime of passion or whatever." It was like an in the moment thing, maybe, but he also looked for and found the sleeping maid or nanny, whoever she is, stole like a piece of jewelry and then planted it, or someone. The things that the monster frames someone for murder. You don't frame someone for murder unless you're doing it logically and willingly and consciously. And if you're consciously killing innocent people for your own sense of revenge, that makes you a monster, it makes you the bad guy. The monster is the villain of the story. You could argue it's a tragic villain. Obviously, it's a tragic villain. You could say that Victor's responsible for kicking this off to begin with, which he is, but there becomes a point where like you stop being a victim and just start being, an abuser yourself. Like you don't chase a man to like it's like a desert island or something. I can't remember exactly how it went. I think what happened was it was before Elizabeth was killed. What happened was he and his college friend were like in hiding, and then uh, the monster tracked him down and killed the friend. I'm gonna get my timeline a bit mixed up, but the important thing is that the monster is like willingly and intentionally killing innocent bystanders for the sole purpose of tormenting one guy. And that's not justice. That's not righteous. That's not justifiable. Like even if the monster did dedicate his life to just torturing specifically Victor, and there was absolutely no like innocent casualties, it'd still be messed up because it's an issue of incompetency versus malice, and malice is significantly worse than incompetency. And I just got really upset with this whole thing because I've just read some really dumb comments from people who very clearly have not read the book. Like I've probably read Frankenstein like 30 times. Like I've probably read it every single year from like middle school and the high school because everyone wants to have it as their required reading because oh it's so impressive and whatever. Uh, yeah, kinda. I guess. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, yeah, it's like it's one of the first like big sci-fi things. Other people have done more impressive stuff, but that's more like a Seinfeld situation where you don't really appreciate how good something was purely because it was the first of it. Like there's a book called The Bad Seed, and it's about this little girl who goes and kills people. And it's supposed to be like a big discussion about nature versus nurture and all that stuff. The important thing is that it's a killer kid, and that's been done to death with things like The Orphan and The Good Child and The Omen, basically all these like movies. Uh, but it was the first one to do it, so because it's kind of bland, you don't really appreciate the fact that well, it was doing something revolutionary at the time. It's just that it didn't really advance. And that's kind of how Frankenstein is. Although, again, the this whole like philosophical thing about like who was really to blame. I think people just got way up their own ass with it. Like where they got so obsessed with like actually Victor Frankenstein was the bad guy all along. Like I think you're just taking like the twist or not the twist, but like the point of it to like the nth degree. And based on the comments I saw of people talking about, because I going back to the idea of that this was a comment chain I was yelling about, arguing with people, and people were just like saying things about the creature that just weren't true. Like someone said, like it's the equivalent of leaving like a rabid pit bull next to your newborn baby. Like, no, it's not. The monster isn't a rabid. The creature isn't a rabid pit bull. It's like intellectually, the monster is probably smarter than Frankenstein. The only reason the monster can't create his own girlfriend is because it doesn't have like the access to resources that Victor did. If it was able to go to school and just learn all the stuff Frankenstein learned, then he'd be able to make an army of his own people. Uh, if I forget where I'm going with that, but the important thing is that the monster's like way more intelligent than people give him credit for. It's not like like yeah, in the very 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 beginning of the monster being alive, it's like a scared lost puppy. It doesn't know what's going on. It's gets shot at, yelled at, thrown at. It doesn't understand the world around it. But like they make Mary Shelley makes a big point about how quickly it learns. Like he learns how to use fire and make fire extremely, extremely quickly. He learns how to speak English and French from that one family very, very quickly. I mean, for Christ's sake, he finds a copy of Paradise Lost and reads it and does his own analysis of it. That's another thing that's really annoys me, how people miss the point of Paradise Lost. But anyway, so that really annoyed me um, about how people like are overly sympathetic towards the monster to like the creature, and I get it. Like it sucks that like that's that creature's life, but it's not like it's a tragedy. The story's a tragedy. It's not that one's at fault. Well, I mean, one is kind of at fault, but there becomes a point where the monster basically wears out its sympathy. But people don't seem to care about that because they didn't read the book. I think a lot of people just like kept being told the same thing over and over and over again to the point where that just became the accepted interpretation, and then people just hear Frankenstein and go, "Oh, well, that's the one about the monster," where the monster was the good guy and the scientist was the bad guy. It reminds me a lot of like, it sounds weird, but have you ever like heard someone talk about like the flat Earth theory or hypothesis, technically, I guess? It's kind of dumb, right? But you hear people who shit on it, and it's very obvious that they basically have no idea what they're talking about. Like, yeah, that guy is like wrong and kind of stupid and using bad logic for his like flat Earth theory, but at least he's thinking about it. You just went to public school and were told that it was round and just kind of rolled with it. Like the fact that you're correct is completely incidental of your own intelligence. That's also how I feel about like climate change stuff. Like a lot of people are like yeah, there's like a lot of environmental damage being done by people, and then people just like assume they know everything just because they happen to be right about that fact. Like, I mean, yeah, people saying that there's absolutely no thing whatsoever where it's all a myth is kind of stupid, but you're just kind of blankly signing off on anything that says that it's real or like any possible solution just because you just are told that's what's correct. And I don't think there's anything more like annoying, let alone dangerous, than someone who is right but doesn't understand why they're right. Because what they do is they take it to the nth degree, where now they're making assumptions based on what they were told, which is just more assumptions. They heard that the monster in Frankenstein was actually the good guy, so they work backwards from there. And no one reads the book. No one has read the book. No one read the book where the monster finds a copy of Paradise Lost, the story of Satan, how Satan screwed over humanity almost forever, about how Satan constantly makes everything worse for everyone, including himself, constantly, over and over and over again, because of his ego and his unwillingness to just calm down and stop being so pissy about humans existing. And, like, it's Satan, it's the bad guy, and the monster relates to Satan. The monster's like, yeah, this creature, this was that was abandoned by his creator. I relate to that. But the thing though is like that isn't what happened in Paradise Lost. In Paradise Lost, God's like, hey, I love all you guys, my angel dudes, but I'm gonna make these guys now. So just kind of like treat them really good because I love them too, and maybe a little bit more than you guys, but you guys are really just extensions of myself, so it's all kosher. And then Satan just like flips his shit because he doesn't like the idea of having to bow before a lesser being, which is stupid because like if you existed for how many thousands of years at that point, actually technically you'd probably only exist for like 2 days or 3 days. I forget on what day mankind was made, but I haven't read Genesis in a while. The important thing is that if like your entire existence you are created with the knowledge that your boss knows everything and is in control of every aspect of reality and knows exactly how everything's going to go down, wouldn't you just want to think like, hey, actually, um, I think if we just do what he says, everything's going to work out right? Uh, but oh well. But yeah, so the monster relates to that, even though it's kind of missing the point. And like you can't relate to Satan like and expect to be taken seriously as like a tragic figure because that's just a character that like for the character of Satan from Paradise Lost just constantly makes everything worse for himself. He's his own worst enemy. Um And I'll give the monster credit. Like society does not like him. Humans are scared of him. Like everything, like animals, people, everything has like a visceral reaction to him because he is an unnatural being. Uh, it just doesn't belong. It doesn't compute in the brain, so it's all crazy. But later on in the story, I think it was after Frankenstein started tearing up the girlfriend monster. Depending on which interpretation you read, or version, whether or not he actually succeeds. Like that's what I like about the like the Bride of Frankenstein or whatever it is, where he makes the girl, but she freaks out because it's a monster, and that's like the tragedy of that. And then I have somewhere around here I have Junji Ito's copy or version, which I really really like the artwork, but I don't like the idea of like having the monster. Like, yeah, sorry, but I don't like the idea of like it being like the girl who got killed. I think that's giving it too much whatever. Anyway, the monster says something along the lines of, uh, "I have a capacity for love which you cannot possibly comprehend, and if I'm unallowed to indulge in that, then I will indulge in evil or indulge in violence, or I have a capacity for love and violence that you cannot comprehend. If I cannot engage in one, I will indulge in the other." Basically saying, well, if I can't have like this nice thing, if I can't be happy, I'm going to just dedicate my life to you suffering forever. And that's malice. Like that's a conscious effort to be terrible. And I think that's what makes you a monster, you know? Like willingly causing harm, willingly causing like anguish and suffering, especially to innocent people. The kid didn't deserve to be killed. The maid didn't deserve to be killed. Elizabeth didn't deserve to be killed. And Frank, he doesn't even really kill Victor at the end. Victor dies of chasing the monster down. When I think about it, if they wanted to like solve everything, if Victor was, see, that's why Victor is stupid. If he was smarter, his whole fear about the monster like procreating, just don't make the chick one with like viable reproductive organs. Just leave them out. Uh, or the monster could have just said, yeah, Victor, you're gonna teach me how to do the science stuff because I'm smarter than you. And if you don't, then I'll just kill whoever. And either of those solutions would have made both of them happy, or one of them happy at least. One's preferable to the other, in which case you don't have to worry about extra little guys running around. I'm just rambling now. Uh, the monster was the monster. That's the twist. The monster was the monster all along. That's it. We're done. I'm done. I'm tired. I'm going to bed.